The billionaire was told by trusted doctors that his beloved mother was completely blind, and for years he accepted their words without question. But everything changed the day a new maid entered the mansion, noticed strange signs everyone else had ignored, and uncovered shocking evidence that revealed the truth behind the so-called blindness. A truth that exposed corruption, betrayal, and ultimately gave his mother a second chance to see again. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that, Mrs. Eleanor had always been known for her gentle and kind nature, but life had recently become very difficult for her. She had lost her sight, which made her completely dependent on others for even the simplest tasks. Her son, William Carter, was one of the wealthiest men in the country, and he had placed her in his large and luxurious mansion. Despite the beautiful house and the team of staff around her, Eleanor felt more isolated than ever. The nurses and maids rarely spoke to her, only doing their duties without showing warmth or kindness. The grand rooms of the mansion felt empty and cold, filled with silence most of the time. William was constantly occupied with his businesses and hardly ever visited. He trusted the medical staff to take care of everything, never noticing how lonely and neglected his mother felt. Eleanor spent her days mostly in silence, whispering words to herself that nobody listened to or cared about. Although Eleanor lived in wealth, her life did not feel rich. The staff treated her as if she were just another responsibility, ignoring her emotions and presence. When she asked questions, they often gave short, cold replies, or sometimes acted as though they had not heard her at all. The lack of human connection hurt her deeply. Her blindness seemed to separate her not only from the world outside, but from everyone inside the house as well. William believed his mother's condition could never improve and never questioned the doctor's judgment. Because of this, he did not seek new treatments or alternative opinions. To him, his wealth was a shield that could solve any problem, yet it could not bring back his mother's sight. Eleanor's days became repetitive, waking, eating, sitting quietly, and going to bed with no joy. Even the sound of footsteps in the hallway reminded her of how distant everyone had become. The loneliness grew heavier as time passed. Eleanor longed for simple conversations, laughter, and warmth, but the staff treated her like a task, not a person. Sometimes she spoke aloud just to hear her own voice, pretending she was not completely invisible in the world she could no longer see. Her blindness forced her to rely on touch and memory to move around, but nobody offered patience or encouragement. Instead, she was often rushed or ignored, as if her presence was a burden. William's rare visits were brief and formal, filled with polite but distant words. He would ask if she needed anything, then quickly return to his business. Eleanor never wanted material things. She only wanted company. Her heart ached for her son's attention, yet she hid her feelings, fearing she would seem ungrateful. In such an enormous house filled with people, she had never felt so completely alone. Despite this, Eleanor tried to hold on to hope. She remembered her younger days, raising William with love and sacrifice. She thought often about how she had taught him kindness, though she now felt he had forgotten those lessons. The mansion's lifeless air made her wonder if she had become nothing more than a forgotten piece of the past. Even the garden outside, which she used to enjoy, was now out of her reach. Nobody bothered to guide her there anymore. When the staff passed by her, she could feel their indifference. Sometimes she stretched her hand out, hoping for a comforting touch, but nobody stopped. Everyone assumed her blindness was permanent, something that could never be changed, so they acted as though she was already lost to the world. Yet inside her heart, Eleanor still believed life could give her one more reason to smile, one more connection to feel alive again. That moment came when Rachel arrived. She was a new maid, hired without much notice or introduction, but Eleanor sensed something different about her right away. Unlike the others, Rachel spoke kindly, addressing Eleanor with respect and care. Her voice carried patience and gentleness that immediately softened the cold atmosphere of the house. She guided Eleanor carefully, describing the rooms, the objects, and the world outside with detail so Eleanor could imagine them. Rachel never treated her as a burden, but as someone worth attention and dignity. Eleanor's heart, which had felt so heavy for so long, began to feel lighter. She found herself waiting each day for Rachel's presence, enjoying the conversations they shared. For the first time in months, she felt like someone truly saw her, even if she could not see them. Rachel's presence was like a new light, shining into the darkness of Eleanor's world. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. Eleanor felt comfortable opening her heart to Rachel, sharing her fears, her memories, and her loneliness. Rachel listened with patience, never rushing her, always giving her full attention. She brought small joys into Eleanor's days, whether through gentle words, laughter, or simply holding her hand. Eleanor, who had been ignored for so long, finally felt loved again. She began calling Rachel "my daughter," a name that came from the deepest part of her heart. Rachel accepted this affection without hesitation, making Eleanor feel safe and valued. The mansion, once filled only with silence and coldness, started to feel alive again because of one person's kindness. For Eleanor, Rachel's arrival was not just the presence of a maid, it was the beginning of hope, of comfort, and of the chance to feel like family again. Everything in her life started to change from that moment onward. Rachel's first day in the Carter mansion was very different from what anyone expected. While most new staff members came in quiet and nervous, Rachel carried herself with calmness and respect. She introduced herself to Eleanor in a warm and gentle voice, something the elderly woman had not experienced in a long time. From the start, Rachel made sure to treat Eleanor as a person, not just a patient or responsibility. She helped her get dressed with care, describing the colors and fabrics so Eleanor could picture them in her mind. At mealtime, Rachel didn't just serve food. She asked Eleanor about her favorite dishes and made sure to prepare them, even when it took extra effort. Eleanor, who had been ignored and dismissed for months, immediately noticed this difference. With Rachel nearby, her meals tasted better, her clothes felt more comfortable, and her daily routine was no longer empty. For the first time in a long while, Eleanor felt truly cared for. As days passed, Eleanor started to smile again. The other staff members noticed, but they didn't understand why. For them, Rachel's behavior seemed unnecessary, even foolish. But for Eleanor, it was a small miracle. Rachel spoke with her throughout the day, asking questions and sharing simple stories, making the silence in the mansion less heavy. She guided Eleanor gently through hallways, always warning her of steps or furniture in the way. Rachel never rushed her, never made her feel like a burden. This kindness slowly brought back Eleanor's confidence. She began to laugh at small jokes, recall happy memories, and even hum while waiting for Rachel. The staff who once thought Eleanor was silent and broken now saw her coming back to life, and it was all because Rachel treated her with patience and dignity. The mansion, which had felt so lifeless, started to feel like a home again, at least for Eleanor. Rachel quickly noticed something important about Eleanor. Though she could not see, her mind was sharp and clear. She remembered conversations in detail, recognized voices instantly, and often surprised Rachel with her quick wit. Eleanor asked thoughtful questions and enjoyed discussing things far beyond her situation, such as William's business or events she remembered from years ago. This intelligence, hidden beneath the surface of her blindness, impressed Rachel. She realized Eleanor was far more aware of her surroundings than the staff gave her credit for. While the others spoke about Eleanor as if she were weak or confused, Rachel knew better. She saw the strength in Eleanor's words and the determination in her tone. This made their bond grow deeper, because Rachel treated her not as fragile, but as a strong woman who still had so much to offer. Eleanor, feeling respected and valued, opened her heart more each day, and Rachel became her trusted companion in the lonely mansion. The closeness between them grew very strong. Eleanor began calling Rachel "my daughter," a name that carried deep affection. This small phrase changed everything for both of them. For Eleanor, it was a way of filling the empty space left by her distant son, William. For Rachel, it was a sign that she had truly earned Eleanor's trust and love. They shared conversations about life, family, and memories. Rachel brushed Eleanor's hair, held her hand during meals, and sat with her for long talks in the evenings. These moments became the highlight of Eleanor's days. However, not everyone in the house was pleased. The other staff members found the relationship strange and even irritating. They whispered among themselves, mocking the idea of a maid being treated like family. Some became colder toward Rachel, seeing her kindness as unnecessary. But Rachel didn't care. For her, this was more than a job. Eleanor had become special to her. Rachel began to see her role differently. She no longer thought of herself simply as an employee in the Carter mansion. Instead, she felt a responsibility that was deeply personal. She wanted Eleanor to feel safe, loved, and respected every single day. The bond they shared was unlike anything Rachel had experienced before, and it gave her purpose. She started to notice small details about Eleanor that others ignored. For example, Eleanor could always sense when Rachel entered the room, even before she spoke. She could move through familiar spaces with surprising confidence, sometimes reaching for objects with accuracy. Rachel thought this was unusual, but she dismissed it at first, believing it was just sharp memory and careful listening. Still, these small observations began to stay in her mind. She wondered if perhaps there was something more to Eleanor's condition than what everyone believed. Slowly, Rachel started to pay even closer attention. The questions grew stronger as Rachel continued to watch Eleanor. She noticed how Eleanor sometimes turned her head directly toward people as if she could see them. She reacted quickly to small movements, like a cup being placed on a table or curtains being pulled aside. These little things made Rachel curious. Could it be that Eleanor's blindness was not as permanent as everyone thought? Nobody else in the house seemed to notice, or maybe they didn't care. Rachel, however, could not ignore what she was seeing. She began to think about the doctors, the nurses, and even William, who all believed Eleanor's blindness was irreversible. But Rachel's instincts told her there was more to discover. For Rachel, helping Eleanor was no longer just about kindness. It was about uncovering the truth. She kept her questions quiet for now, but she knew something important was hidden behind Eleanor's supposed blindness, and she was determined to find out. While cleaning Eleanor's room one afternoon, Rachel accidentally dropped a cloth on the floor. The sound was small, something most people would ignore, but Rachel's eyes caught a detail that surprised her. As the cloth fell, Eleanor's head tilted slightly in its direction. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but enough to raise a question in Rachel's mind. Could Eleanor have seen it? At first, Rachel told herself it might just be instinct. Maybe Eleanor had reacted to the noise. Yet the movement seemed too precise, as if Eleanor had actually followed the cloth with her eyes. Rachel kept thinking about it, replaying the moment in her head while she finished her chores. She tried not to jump to conclusions, but the doubt stayed with her. For months, everyone had been convinced Eleanor's blindness was absolute, and William trusted the doctors without hesitation. Still, what Rachel had just witnessed did not match what she had been told. From that moment, Rachel started to pay closer attention. She began to quietly observe Eleanor throughout the day, watching her reactions to different situations. The more she looked, the more unusual things she noticed. Sometimes, when a maid opened the curtains, Eleanor would flinch slightly, as if the sudden sunlight bothered her. At other times, when Rachel walked across the room, Eleanor's head seemed to follow the sound, but her movement looked too precise, like she could actually sense where Rachel was. The idea that Eleanor might not be completely blind grew stronger in Rachel's mind. She knew she couldn't just ask her directly, because if she was wrong, it might upset Eleanor. Instead, Rachel decided to keep watching quietly, waiting for clearer signs. It became almost like a secret mission for her, something she thought about constantly, even when she was doing simple tasks like preparing meals or cleaning the hallways. To be certain, Rachel began running small tests without telling anyone. She rearranged objects in Eleanor's room to see how she would react. One morning, Rachel moved the chair Eleanor usually touched while walking, placing it a little farther than usual. To her surprise, Eleanor adjusted quickly, reaching the chair without hesitation. Another time, Rachel placed a book on the table in a new spot. When Eleanor reached for it later, her hand went straight to the book's new position, almost as if she had seen where it was placed. Each of these small incidents added to Rachel's suspicions. She grew more convinced that something was not right with the story everyone believed. Still, she didn't want to accuse anyone without real evidence. For all she knew, Eleanor might have simply memorized her surroundings very well. Yet Rachel's instincts told her the truth was different, and she refused to ignore the signs she kept seeing. The more Rachel tested, the more patterns appeared. Eleanor walked through the mansion with surprising ease for someone completely blind. She rarely bumped into objects and sometimes even avoided things that had just been moved. Rachel once placed a small stool in the hallway by accident, and instead of tripping, Eleanor slowed down and stepped carefully around it. This made Rachel's suspicions grow stronger. Another time, Rachel noticed Eleanor turning her face slightly toward the sunlight streaming in from the garden windows. The reaction was natural, something a person with vision might do, not someone blind. All of these small details built up into something Rachel could not deny. It wasn't just coincidence. Eleanor had abilities that didn't match her supposed blindness. Rachel started keeping track of these moments in her mind, like pieces of a puzzle. The question now was how to put them together into proof strong enough to convince others. Rachel also thought about the risks. If she confronted the medical staff without solid proof, they would likely dismiss her as foolish. They might even punish her for interfering since she was only a maid. William trusted the doctors completely, so going to him without evidence was impossible. For Rachel, the only option was to keep collecting more signs until she was absolutely certain. She knew she had to be careful, because if the staff noticed her experiments, they might stop her. At the same time, she didn't want Eleanor to feel tested or mistrusted. Rachel cared too much about her to make her uncomfortable. This balance was difficult, but Rachel stayed patient. She spoke to Eleanor with the same kindness as always, but inside her mind was working constantly, thinking of ways to confirm the truth. The mansion felt like it was hiding a secret, and Rachel was determined to uncover it. Rachel's curiosity soon turned into determination. Every day, she became more convinced that Eleanor's blindness was not as absolute as everyone claimed. The small signs were too many to ignore. The subtle turns of her head, the quick adjustments to objects, the way she moved through spaces with confidence. Rachel knew she was getting closer to the truth, but she still needed undeniable proof before she could confront the medical staff or speak to William. She reminded herself that without evidence, her words would carry no weight. But her instincts told her the proof she needed was near, just waiting for the right moment to appear. She decided to stay alert, ready to catch that moment when it came. As she continued her daily tasks, Rachel knew something important was just around the corner, something that would finally reveal whether Eleanor's blindness was real or not. It was a calm afternoon when Rachel sat beside Eleanor, gently wiping her eyes with a soft cloth. She always took her time with this task, careful not to cause any discomfort. As she worked, a thought crossed her mind. For days, she had been noticing strange reactions from Eleanor, signs that didn't match what a completely blind person would normally do. Curiosity grew stronger inside her, and she decided to try something small, something harmless. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small flashlight she carried for her cleaning duties. She acted as though she was still tidying the room, not wanting Eleanor to suspect anything unusual. With her hand steady, she turned the flashlight on and slowly waved it in front of Eleanor's eyes. To her shock, Eleanor blinked. The reaction was clear and undeniable. Rachel froze for a moment, her heart racing, realizing she might have just discovered something very important. Rachel couldn't believe what she had just seen. She told herself to stay calm, but her mind was already spinning with questions. Could it really be possible that Eleanor could see something? She repeated the test, moving the light again, this time paying even closer attention. Once more, Eleanor's eyes reacted, blinking as if sensing the brightness. Rachel's hands trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. She leaned closer and whispered softly, almost afraid of the answer. "Did you see anything?" She didn't expect a reply, but Eleanor's lips parted, and a faint, trembling voice came out. "I think I see a light, my dear." The words sent a chill through Rachel. It was the confirmation she had been waiting for, the proof she had suspected but never dared to believe until now. This single moment changed everything, making Rachel realize she was standing at the edge of a discovery far bigger than herself. Eleanor's words lingered in Rachel's ears. "I think I see a light, my dear." The way she said it was filled with both fear and hope, as if she herself couldn't believe it. Rachel's heart ached with compassion. She placed a gentle hand on Eleanor's shoulder, trying to comfort her while holding back her own emotions. If Eleanor could see light, even faintly, then her condition wasn't what everyone believed. For months, the medical staff had insisted her blindness was permanent and irreversible. William, too, had accepted it without question. Yet here was the truth, hidden in plain sight, revealed only because Rachel dared to test it. She realized how much Eleanor had suffered in silence, ignored and treated as helpless. Now, a new path had opened. Rachel knew this was not only about Eleanor's vision. It was about uncovering why she had been left in darkness for so long, and who was responsible for keeping her that way. Rachel sat quietly for a moment, processing what had just happened. Her instincts had been right all along. The small reactions she had noticed, the way Eleanor turned her head toward movement, avoided obstacles, or reacted to sunlight, were not accidents. They were signs of vision, however weak. She wondered if Eleanor herself had been unsure, too afraid to believe she could still see. The staff had convinced everyone, even Eleanor, that there was no hope. Rachel now understood why. If Eleanor had even the slightest chance of recovery, then why had no one tried to help her? That thought filled Rachel with anger, but also determination. She couldn't reveal her discovery yet, not without knowing more. If she rushed, the doctors or William might shut her out completely. She had to be careful, to find proof that nobody could deny. Only then could she protect Eleanor and bring the truth to light. Her mind raced with possibilities. Maybe Eleanor's condition wasn't natural. Could it be the result of some wrong treatment or even intentional neglect? Rachel didn't want to think badly of William, but she knew he trusted others too much, never questioning their motives. The medical staff might be hiding something, perhaps even keeping Eleanor's blindness alive for their own reasons. Rachel had to consider every possibility. What she did know for certain was that Eleanor deserved answers, and she was the only one who cared enough to search for them. Rachel felt a new responsibility settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just a maid anymore, she was Eleanor's protector, the only person standing between her and the lies surrounding her. The thought scared her, but it also gave her strength. She knew she couldn't stay silent. The truth was out there, and she would find it, no matter how difficult it might be. As Eleanor sat quietly, still holding on to the fragile hope of what she had just experienced, Rachel gave her a reassuring smile she couldn't see. "Don't worry, my dear," Rachel whispered softly. "We will figure this out together." Deep inside, she promised herself she would not stop until she uncovered everything hidden behind Eleanor's condition. She now had proof, even if small, that things were not as they seemed. The faint blink, the whispered words, they were enough to spark a fire in Rachel's heart. For Eleanor, the discovery was a mix of fear and hope. But for Rachel, it was the start of a mission. She realized Eleanor's blindness might not be natural, and that someone could be keeping her in the dark on purpose. With this new knowledge, Rachel felt more determined than ever. The moment Eleanor said, "I think I see a light, my dear," everything in their lives changed forever. One afternoon, Rachel was assigned to clean the old office that once belonged to the mansion's in-house doctor. The room had not been touched in a long time, and dust coated the wooden desk, shelves, and medical equipment. She moved carefully, wiping surfaces and stacking old papers into neat piles. As she polished the desk, her hand brushed against a drawer handle that felt loose. Curious, she pulled it open and was surprised to find it unlocked. Inside, the drawer contained several items that immediately caught her attention. Small glass bottles with faded labels, and a thick notebook filled with handwritten notes. The bottles contained leftover medication, some still sealed and others half empty. Rachel picked one up and tried to read the label, but most of the writing had worn away. Still, the dates suggested these medicines had been prescribed years ago. During the same period, Eleanor began losing her vision. A strange feeling ran through her as she set the bottle aside. Rachel carefully opened the notebook and began flipping through the pages. The handwriting was neat but hurried in places, full of medical terms she didn't understand completely. Yet some words stood out clearly: daily treatment, patient Eleanor Carter, and notes about side effects. Her eyes widened when she read a specific line: prolonged use may cause visual degeneration and potential blindness. Rachel felt her heart pound as she realized what this meant. These medicines, given daily to Eleanor, had been prescribed under the claim they were for joint pain. But according to these notes, they could have caused her sight to fail. She turned more pages, each one filled with observations, dosages, and warnings. The deeper she read, the clearer the picture became. Eleanor hadn't simply gone blind naturally. The treatment she had been receiving may have played a direct role in her condition. Rachel's hands shook slightly as she closed the notebook, trying to calm herself. As Rachel read further, she noticed something even more troubling. Scattered among the notes were references to emails exchanged with a pharmaceutical company. The doctor had written about extended testing, dosage adjustments, and progress reports. It didn't look like regular medical care, it looked like experimentation. Rachel stared at the words, realizing that Eleanor might not have been treated as a patient at all, but as part of some hidden arrangement. The thought made her sick. Eleanor had trusted the doctor completely, and William had relied on his expertise without doubt. But here, in black and white, were signs of betrayal. Rachel placed the notebook on the desk and looked again at the bottles. The dates, the names, the doses, all pointed to something far more sinister. This wasn't just a mistake. It looked intentional, and if true, it meant Eleanor had suffered blindness because of someone's selfish decision. Rachel felt both anger and fear growing inside her. She closed the drawer slowly, her mind filled with questions. Why would a doctor give medicine with such dangerous side effects to someone like Eleanor? And why were there notes about emails with a company instead of focusing only on her health? Rachel thought about William, who had no idea about this. He trusted the medical staff blindly, never checking details. The more she thought about it, the more it became clear. Eleanor might have been used in some sort of secret medical deal. Rachel paced the room, struggling to process everything. She knew she had discovered something critical, something that explained why Eleanor's blindness didn't make sense. At the same time, she realized the risk of keeping this knowledge to herself. If anyone in the house learned she had seen these documents, they might try to stop her. She needed to be careful, but she also knew she couldn't ignore what she had found. Rachel decided she had to act. The notebook and the bottles were evidence, but not enough on their own. If she wanted to uncover the truth, she needed to match what she had found with Eleanor's official medical records. Only then could she prove beyond doubt that the treatment given in the mansion was the cause of her blindness. Rachel carefully memorized the doctor's notes, the medicine names, and the references to the pharmaceutical company. She knew she couldn't take the notebook without raising suspicion, so she placed everything back exactly as she had found it. Still, the weight of the discovery pressed heavily on her chest. Eleanor had suffered for years, abandoned and ignored, when the real cause of her blindness might have been right here all along. Rachel clenched her fists, vowing she would not let this stay hidden. She was closer to the truth now than ever before. Before leaving the office, Rachel took one last look at the drawer. The bottles of medication sat silently, holding the answers to Eleanor's suffering. The notebook, filled with cold notes and hidden secrets, seemed almost alive in its cruelty. Rachel shut the drawer firmly, her mind racing. She knew she had stumbled onto a massive discovery, one that could change everything. Eleanor's blindness was no longer just a tragedy, it was a mystery tied to greed and betrayal. Rachel's heart burned with determination. She couldn't stop here. She had to dig deeper, find the official medical files, and expose the truth. As she walked out of the office, she felt the weight of responsibility more than ever. This wasn't just about helping Eleanor smile again, it was about giving her justice. Rachel understood that from this moment forward, nothing would be the same. She was standing on the edge of uncovering something enormous. Rachel spent the next few days quietly digging deeper into the mystery. She knew she couldn't solve this alone, so she reached out to a nurse she trusted from her previous job. This friend had experience in hospital administration and access to information that Rachel could never obtain on her own. Late at night, after finishing her duties at the mansion, Rachel would call her nurse friend, sharing bits of what she had discovered about Eleanor's medicine and the doctor's notes. Together, they began to piece things together. The nurse looked into the pharmaceutical company mentioned in the doctor's notebook and quickly found something disturbing. The same company was a major investor in the hospital where Eleanor had been diagnosed and treated. Rachel's heart sank when she heard this. It meant the hospital wasn't just a neutral party. It had a financial interest in keeping Eleanor on medication. The more Rachel learned, the more dangerous and calculated the whole situation seemed. Rachel's friend continued investigating, sending her screenshots, documents, and public records about the hospital and the pharmaceutical company. Each new detail painted a clearer and darker picture. The company supplied the medicine, the hospital prescribed it, and Eleanor stayed dependent on it. It was a loop that benefited everyone involved, except Eleanor herself, but one discovery stood out above all the rest. The hospital's donor list revealed a familiar name, William Carter. Rachel stared at the screen in shock. William, Eleanor's son, was one of the hospital's biggest donors. The numbers were staggering, massive monthly donations increasing over time. Rachel felt a mix of anger and disbelief. William, who was always too busy to visit his mother, had been unknowingly funding the very system that was hurting her. He believed he was helping the hospital provide better care, but in reality, his money was feeding a corrupt arrangement. Rachel's heart raced as she processed this new information. For the first time, she understood the full scale of what was happening. Eleanor wasn't just a victim of bad medicine. She had been turned into a permanent patient, a reliable source of income for a hospital and a pharmaceutical company working together. The staff had no reason to help her recover. The system was built to keep her dependent. Rachel pictured Eleanor sitting alone in her room, taking her daily pills, trusting that they were for her health. She thought of William, sending his monthly donations without asking where the money went, assuming it was for good. It made Rachel sick to her stomach. This wasn't just negligence, it was a plan, a deliberate way to profit from Eleanor's suffering. She realized that if she didn't act soon, Eleanor might never escape this trap. At the same time, Rachel knew the danger she was in. She was just a maid with no authority, no power, and no proof strong enough to take to the police or the media. If the hospital or pharmaceutical company found out she was investigating, they could destroy her reputation or worse. Even William might not believe her at first, thinking she was trying to manipulate him. Rachel understood she had to be careful. She needed solid evidence, documents, records, something undeniable. Her nurse friend promised to help her gather everything she needed, but it would take time. Rachel felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her. Every day, she continued working as usual, taking care of Eleanor as if nothing had changed. But inside, she was preparing for a battle. She also began to notice new details about the mansion's finances. Bills arrived regularly from the hospital, each one larger than the last. William paid them without question, his staff handling the paperwork automatically. Rachel realized how easily the system had taken advantage of his trust. A billionaire's wealth was like an endless fountain to them, and Eleanor's condition was their excuse to keep drawing from it. Rachel felt furious, but also determined. She was no longer just caring for Eleanor's health. She was fighting for her freedom. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. Eleanor's blindness wasn't just a medical issue. It was the center of a corrupt network of money, power, and deception. Rachel couldn't let it continue. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, Rachel understood the horrifying truth in full. Eleanor had been turned into a permanent patient to feed a corrupt system. The hospital and the pharmaceutical company profited from her condition, while William unknowingly funded their scheme through massive monthly donations. The tragedy of it all hit Rachel hard. Eleanor had raised her son with love, only to end up trapped in a cycle of exploitation supported by his generosity. Rachel felt anger, sadness, and a powerful sense of duty all at once. She knew she had crossed a line. This was no longer just about suspicions or small discoveries. This was about exposing an entire system built on lies and greed. With her nurse friend's help, Rachel prepared herself for the next step. She was standing at the edge of a massive discovery, and there was no turning back. Rachel knew she needed more than suspicions and half-truths if she wanted to uncover what was really happening to Eleanor. One evening, she secretly reached out to a former nurse she had heard about through her trusted friend. This nurse had once worked closely with Eleanor, but had been dismissed suddenly under circumstances nobody ever explained. When Rachel managed to contact her, the woman was hesitant at first. She sounded nervous, her voice trembling as if she feared someone might overhear. Still, after some convincing, the nurse agreed to meet Rachel in private. During their conversation, the nurse admitted she had always thought Eleanor's treatment was unusual. The prescribed medication did not match the condition described in the reports. She had questioned it quietly, but the doctor in charge had dismissed her concerns. Soon afterward, she was fired without warning. Hearing this, Rachel realized she was not imagining things. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to connect. The nurse revealed something else that shocked Rachel. A younger doctor, fresh out of training, had once dared to question the same medication and its strange effects. Instead of being heard, he was quickly removed from the hospital staff, reassigned far away, and never mentioned again. The pattern was clear. Anyone who doubted the treatment or raised suspicions was silenced or pushed aside. Rachel felt a chill as she listened. The corruption went deeper than she thought, involving not only the mansion's doctor, but also higher levels of the hospital. The nurse confessed she had always regretted not speaking out earlier, but she was afraid of losing her career permanently. Rachel understood the fear, but also saw the confirmation she needed. This wasn't a simple case of negligence. It was a system built on silence, where anyone who threatened to reveal the truth was removed quickly. Eleanor had been trapped inside it, without any defense. After the meeting, Rachel returned to the mansion with her determination stronger than ever. She began carefully collecting evidence in secret. She recorded conversations with staff members, making sure to capture any careless comments about Eleanor's condition or treatment. She photographed the old medical notes, the bottles of medication, and the suspicious bills that kept arriving each month. She even started gathering the hospital's donation receipts tied to William. Late at night, while the rest of the staff slept, Rachel copied down details into a hidden notebook she kept under her bed. Every day, she grew more certain that the truth was within reach, but she also knew the danger was growing. The more evidence she gathered, the more she risked someone noticing. Still, she couldn't stop. Eleanor's life and freedom depended on her. Rachel's mission was no longer just an act of kindness. It was a fight against a powerful system determined to keep Eleanor blind, both physically and figuratively. Her fears came true when one of the older maids in the house began watching her closely. This maid had worked in the mansion for years and was loyal to the house administrator. She noticed Rachel spending extra time in places she shouldn't, like the old office and storage rooms. She noticed Rachel whispering on the phone late at night and sometimes slipping small papers into her pockets. Suspicion grew, and soon the maid reported Rachel's strange behavior to the house administrator. Rachel didn't know it yet, but her secret work was no longer invisible. Whispers began spreading among the staff, and eyes started following her movements. Rachel felt the atmosphere in the mansion change. Conversations grew quieter when she entered the room, and some staff members exchanged looks behind her back. She knew she was running out of time. If the administrator discovered what she was doing, her chance to save Eleanor would vanish completely. Rachel tried to stay calm, but she felt the pressure rising with each passing day. She understood that the web of corruption she had stepped into was far bigger and more dangerous than she had imagined. The hospital, the pharmaceutical company, and even people inside the mansion were all part of the same chain. Eleanor was at the center of it, but she had no idea. Rachel could not let her down. Every moment counted now. If she delayed, the truth might be buried forever, and Rachel herself might be removed, just like the nurse and the doctor before her. She reminded herself why she had started this, because Eleanor trusted her, called her my daughter, and depended on her. That bond gave her strength. Rachel knew she couldn't let fear control her. She had to make a choice quickly before the administrator took action against her. The window of opportunity was closing. The decision became clear in Rachel's mind. She had to go directly to William. He was the only person with enough power and resources to stop this. But the thought terrified her. Would he believe her? William trusted the hospital completely and had little time for his mother's personal care. To him, Rachel was just another maid. If she spoke without solid proof, he might dismiss her or even fire her on the spot. Yet Rachel knew the risk was worth it. She could no longer waste time gathering endless evidence while suspicion closed in on her. The truth couldn't wait. Eleanor's life, health, and dignity were at stake. Rachel held onto her hidden notebook and the small collection of photos and recordings she had made. With her heart pounding, she prepared herself for the hardest step yet, confronting William Carter face to face and praying that he would finally listen. Rachel knew she couldn't waste more time. The suspicion among the staff was growing, and she had already been reported to the house administrator. If she delayed, she might lose her only chance to reach William. So she carefully prepared a letter. She wrote down every detail she had uncovered: the medications with dangerous side effects, the suspicious notes in the doctor's journal, the ties between the hospital and the pharmaceutical company, and even William's own donations being used to maintain the corruption. To make her message stronger, she included copies of photographs she had taken and small notes she had written while gathering evidence. But the most powerful piece she saved for last: a short handwritten note from Eleanor that Rachel had found tucked away in one of her old prayer books. It said, "I still see shadows." Rachel placed everything in an envelope and kept it hidden in her apron, waiting anxiously for William's next rare visit to the mansion. When the day finally came, William arrived in his usual distant manner, checking on a few things and preparing to leave quickly. Rachel knew she had only a small window to act. She approached him with the envelope, her hands trembling, and said, "Please, Mr. Carter, you need to read this." At first, William barely looked at her. He was used to staff asking for favors or trying to gain his attention, and he brushed her off with a wave of his hand. Rachel insisted, her voice firm but respectful. "It's about your mother." That caught his attention for a moment, but he still hesitated. Then Rachel mentioned the handwritten note. Curious despite himself, William opened the envelope and pulled out the small piece of paper with his mother's familiar handwriting. "I still see shadows." He froze. The words pierced through his assumptions, forcing him to finally listen to what Rachel had to say. William looked at Rachel differently now, more alert and less dismissive. He asked her to explain, and Rachel walked him carefully through everything she had discovered. She spoke clearly and calmly, even though her heart raced with fear. She told him about the old doctor's drawer, the bottles of medicine, and the notes that mentioned severe side effects, including blindness. She explained how the nurse confirmed suspicions and how a younger doctor had been silenced for raising questions. Then she showed him the photographs she had taken of documents, bills, and receipts. She even explained the connection between the hospital, the pharmaceutical company, and his own large donations. William's expression hardened as the truth unfolded before him. He listened in silence, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with anger. For the first time, he realized that his mother's suffering was not natural, but manufactured, and worse, his own money had unknowingly fueled the system that caused her pain. By the time Rachel finished, William's patience had run out. Outraged, he stood up and immediately ordered the entire medical staff and house employees responsible for his mother's care to be dismissed. His voice carried authority that nobody dared to challenge. Within hours, the mansion was nearly emptied of the people who had ignored and mistreated Eleanor for so long. Rachel stood quietly in the corner, stunned by the speed of his reaction, but relieved that he had believed her. William then made arrangements for an independent medical team to be brought in, people with no ties to the hospital or the pharmaceutical company. He wanted answers, and he wanted them fast. For the first time, Eleanor's health was being handled with genuine care, not hidden motives. Rachel stayed close by, holding Eleanor's hand, knowing that everything she had fought for was finally starting to pay off. The independent doctors examined Eleanor thoroughly, running tests and reviewing her history without bias. After hours of careful work, they gave William a diagnosis that confirmed Rachel's fears. Eleanor's blindness had not been natural, nor was it irreversible. It had been caused by the prolonged use of a neurotoxic drug that was never meant for her condition. The medicine, supposedly prescribed for joint pain, had slowly destroyed her vision over time. The truth was undeniable, written in the reports the new doctors handed to William. Hearing this, Eleanor trembled, both relieved to finally know the cause and devastated by what had been done to her. Rachel comforted her, whispering reassurances. William sat in silence, the papers shaking in his hands. His anger grew, but beneath it was a crushing weight of guilt. He had trusted blindly, and that trust had cost his mother her sight. William's devastation was overwhelming. For years, he had believed he was helping his mother by funding the hospital and paying for her care without hesitation. Now he understood that his generosity had been exploited. His money used to keep her trapped in darkness. He thought of all the times he had been too busy to visit, too distracted to notice her loneliness, and now he realized she had suffered not just from neglect, but from corruption he had unknowingly supported. The guilt tore at him, heavier than any business failure he had ever faced. He looked at Eleanor, fragile yet strong, and at Rachel, who had risked everything to bring the truth to light. In that moment, William made a silent vow. He would not only seek justice for his mother, but also dedicate himself to making sure such corruption would never harm another family again. His world had changed forever. William wasted no time once the truth was confirmed. The guilt of having unknowingly funded his mother's suffering weighed heavily on him, but he quickly turned that guilt into action. He hired some of the best lawyers in the country, instructing them to dig into every detail of the hospital's records and the pharmaceutical company's dealings. What they uncovered was worse than he could have imagined. Eleanor was not the only victim. Dozens, maybe even hundreds of elderly patients had been misdiagnosed and placed on the same dangerous medication. Each case followed a similar pattern: a prescription for unnecessary drugs, side effects ignored, and families charged with soaring medical bills. The pharmaceutical giant profited from the sales, while the hospital raked in massive donations. The system was designed to make patients permanent clients. William felt sick with anger, but determined to use his power and wealth to bring the whole corrupt network crashing down. The investigation quickly grew in scale, reaching far beyond Eleanor's case. Lawyers collected testimonies from other families who had suffered similar experiences, many of them too afraid to speak until now. Rachel's discoveries became the foundation of the case, her photos, notes, and recordings serving as undeniable proof of the corruption. William made sure Eleanor's story was at the center, not only because she was his mother, but because her courage and suffering represented so many others. Meanwhile, Eleanor began a new treatment process with specialists who genuinely wanted to help her. For the first time in years, she had hope. The doctors confirmed that some of the damage might be reversible, and though the recovery would be slow, there was a real chance of improvement. Rachel stayed by her side through every step, encouraging her and making sure she never felt alone. Their bond, stronger than ever, gave Eleanor the courage to face each day with renewed determination. As weeks passed, the story spread beyond courtrooms and into the public eye. Newspapers, television channels, and online media outlets covered the case relentlessly. The headlines were explosive: billionaire mother a victim of medical corruption, hospital and drug giant under fire, and most famously, Maid uncovers multi-billion-dollar medical scam. Rachel's role could no longer be hidden. She had been the one to notice, to question, and to fight for Eleanor when everyone else turned away. Reporters tried to chase her for interviews, but Rachel avoided the spotlight. For her, fame and recognition meant nothing. She only cared about Eleanor's well-being and the justice being served. William, however, made sure the world knew of Rachel's bravery. He publicly acknowledged that without her, he would have remained blind to the truth, just like his mother had been forced to remain blind physically. The narrative of the case became not only about corruption, but also about courage, loyalty, and love. Inside the Carter mansion, life began to change. The house, once filled with cold silence and mistrust, now carried warmth again. With the old staff gone, William replaced them with people chosen carefully for their kindness and professionalism. Eleanor's medical team visited regularly, updating her treatment plan with genuine progress. Rachel, once hired as just a maid, was given a new role. Eleanor's official caregiver. William announced it himself, saying she would never have to worry about her future. She would have the full support of the family for the rest of her life. Rachel accepted with humility, still seeing herself as Eleanor's daughter in heart more than in title. For Eleanor, this decision brought peace. She no longer felt like a burden. She knew she was surrounded by people who loved her and valued her. The mansion was no longer just a place of wealth, but finally a true home again. As the lawsuits moved forward, justice began to take shape. Executives from the pharmaceutical company faced charges, hospital administrators were removed, and compensation was promised to the families of patients who had suffered. The scheme, once hidden behind polished medical reputations, was now exposed for what it was, a machine of greed that preyed on the vulnerable. William made it his mission to ensure the victims received proper care. He funded programs for elderly patients, hiring independent doctors to oversee treatments across multiple hospitals. Rachel quietly assisted where she could, helping families who reached out after hearing her story. Though the world now saw her as a hero, she continued to focus on simple acts of care, holding Eleanor's hand, reading to her, guiding her through her recovery. The public victory was enormous, but to Rachel it was these private, everyday moments that meant the most. Justice mattered, but Eleanor's happiness mattered more. Months later, the world had moved on to other stories, but inside the Carter mansion, life had been permanently transformed. Eleanor's eyesight began showing slow but real improvement. She could distinguish shapes, light, and movement again, something she once believed impossible. William kept his promise to dedicate himself not only to his mother, but to fighting corruption in healthcare. Rachel, now firmly part of the family, never left Eleanor's side. The bond they shared was unbreakable, built on trust, care, and love that had endured hardship. For Rachel, no headline or recognition could compare to the simple joy of seeing Eleanor smile again, of hearing her laugh, of knowing she no longer felt forgotten or helpless. Justice had been served and redemption had been found. But in Rachel's heart, the true victory was far simpler: Eleanor's happiness. And as long as Eleanor had that, Rachel knew everything she had risked had been worth it. Months had passed since the storm of revelations and legal battles, and the Carter mansion had slowly transformed into a place filled with warmth and life. Rachel had settled into her role as Eleanor's caregiver, guiding her through each step of her recovery process. One bright morning, Rachel walked into the mansion's garden, carrying a small tray with tea. She stopped suddenly when she saw Eleanor sitting quietly among the flowers. Something was different about her. Eleanor was leaning forward, her face turned toward a cluster of roses, and her eyes seemed to be following their colors. Rachel's heart raced as she moved closer, wondering if what she saw was real. With tears streaming down her cheeks, Eleanor whispered, "My dear, I can see the colors." Rachel nearly dropped the tray as she rushed to Eleanor's side, holding her hands. The moment they had both been waiting for had finally arrived. Eleanor's vision had partially returned. Rachel could hardly believe it. For so long, Eleanor had been trapped in darkness, relying only on touch and memory. Now, she was describing shades of red, green, and yellow with a trembling voice, overwhelmed with joy. Rachel hugged her tightly, unable to hold back her own tears. The doctors had warned that recovery would be slow and uncertain, but this breakthrough proved that progress was possible. Eleanor looked around the garden with cautious wonder, as though she were rediscovering the world she had lost. She reached out to touch the petals of the flowers, amazed that she could not only feel them, but see them too. Rachel guided her gently, pointing out the different blooms, helping her match the names with the colors. For Eleanor, it was like being given a second chance at life, and for Rachel, it was the reward for all her struggles and determination to uncover the truth months earlier. As the days went on, The bond between Rachel and Eleanor grew even stronger. They had already considered each other family, but now their connection was unshakable. Eleanor often repeated how much she owed to Rachel, calling her "my daughter" with even greater affection. They spent long hours together, walking in the garden, reading and sharing meals. Eleanor's laughter returned, and her presence filled the mansion with warmth. William noticed the difference as well. He often found them sitting together, Eleanor smiling with a joy he hadn't seen in years. This sight reminded him of all the time he had wasted being distant and blind to his mother's suffering. The guilt never left him completely, but he was determined to make amends. He began visiting more often, setting aside his business meetings to spend time at the mansion. Eleanor, though deeply hurt in the past, welcomed her son back into her heart, ready to rebuild their bond. William's remorse was clear every time he looked at his mother. He confessed openly that his trust in others had blinded him more than her illness ever had. He asked for her forgiveness again and again, holding her hand and promising never to abandon her again. Eleanor, with her gentle nature, forgave him without hesitation. She only wanted her son close to her, and now he finally was. The mansion, once cold and lifeless, echoed with laughter and conversations that had long been missing. Rachel watched this transformation with quiet pride, knowing that the family was healing. She had never expected her role to go this far. What started as a simple job had grown into something life-changing for everyone involved. Rachel not only gave Eleanor her dignity back, but also helped William rediscover what truly mattered. The mansion had become more than a symbol of wealth. It had become a home filled with love. Inspired by everything that had happened, Rachel made a decision. She wanted to do more than just care for Eleanor. She wanted to help others who were suffering in silence, just like Eleanor once had. With William's support and Eleanor's blessing, Rachel began the process of creating a non-profit organization in Eleanor's name. Its purpose would be to combat elder abuse in private institutions and expose corruption in the medical system. Rachel reached out to lawyers, doctors, and former patients, determined to build something that would make a lasting impact. The same courage that had led her to uncover the truth now gave her the strength to fight for countless others. She knew it would be hard work, but she had already proven that persistence and compassion could change lives. Eleanor's story would not only be a personal victory, but also a beacon of hope for many others facing similar struggles. The story came full circle on one quiet evening. Rachel sat beside Eleanor in the garden as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the flowers. Eleanor, now able to see shapes and colors more clearly, turned to Rachel with a smile. "I once said I thought I saw a light, my dear," she whispered softly. "And now I live surrounded by it." Rachel's heart filled with emotion as she squeezed Eleanor's hand. The journey had been filled with danger, corruption, and heartbreak, but it had led them here, to a life of love, healing, and hope. The mansion was alive again, filled with gratitude and joy. Rachel no longer thought of herself as just a maid. She had found her purpose and her family. Eleanor's happiness was her greatest reward, and together they looked forward to the future, knowing the light at the end of the tunnel was finally real. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.